Well, you might recall that that particular period of history is much like the one we're living right now, about 100 years later, having to do with our interaction in foreign affairs, getting involved more in activities in Europe again. Specifically at the end of this period, 1914, we begin to see the first inklings of our first international war, joining with other nations in a war against the Hun. Oh, that's right, World War I, the war to end all wars. Well, that's why you need these texts to bring up a good historical parameter, a background of where we've come from, so you'll know where we're going. Other examples, excellent examples of the other government that most people question, is The New World Order and The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson. Both texts are excellent examples of what's wrong with government and the people behind these scenes, behind the actions that you've seen on national television, behind many of the works that you've read yourself personally, and in fact, many of the fiction pieces that have been done across the country. It's important that if you're going to do this research, again, good foundational works make the difference. There are many texts, of course, and pamphlets that can also be used for educational purposes. Needless to say, the Citizen Rule Book has already been demonstrated. Oh, by the way, did I tell you that the government provides us with a tremendous amount of information that we can demonstrate to people exactly what's going on in government with? Well, that's why we'd recommend, for instance, Supreme Court rulings, Federal Register documents, and a veritable plethora of other publications generated from Pueblo, Colorado, the GPO, Government Printing Office out of Washington, D.C., and there are many other sources. Another example, though, are many works that are being reprinted about original documents and information that was generated by the Founding Fathers. A piece that's on the top here, George Washington's Vision, America's Three Great Perils, is an excellent example of texts that are now being regenerated by the Patriot movement and sent out amongst the people for them to read. They are timely, they're important, and again, they're user-friendly. They can be done down at the individual, the personal level, generated in mass and distributed at your discretion. Now, one of the other things that bothers me the most about watching the Patriot movement right now, ladies and gentlemen, is while we've made tremendous strides, there are many underlying currents that seem to be creating eddies and backwashes within the Patriot movement itself. One of them is the fear that, well, somebody will find out what we're doing. Well, congratulations. That's a mystery to me, isn't it? The New World Order crowd, yes, has spies. Yes, they're trying to collect names. So what you're going to have to decide is what type of a free sovereign you are. In order for us to remain free, it is going to have to cost us something. There has never been a time in our past when liberty has been cheap. And in this case, if we are not willing to stand up, again, our enemy is more than willing to stand in our place. And you are going to get, well, what you deserve. With regard to being involved, choose a level that you're willing to participate in, whatever activities, and become a master of that activity. Become an expert in that area. Become an educator. Become a person who will help to develop other minds. Now, bottom line to the basic story, though, is this. Do you think that Patrick Henry would be satisfied with anything less than 100%? Do you think that John Adams, do you think that George Washington himself, a man who was well-to-do and really didn't have to stand up? Well, he felt that he did. He understood his place in history, I think. So did all the other men who decided to put their name on the line and also their lives, their fortunes, their future, because they understood what they could achieve. The only real weapon that our enemy has first is this oppressive thought that somehow they're not all-seeing and all-knowing. Well, yes, they do have good resources, but they are not all-seeing and they are not all-knowing. Fact of the matter is that even as we speak, the reason I brought up the media earlier is because they're trying to re-engineer. They're desperately trying to find a foothold, a pad that they can land on because of all the tools that we have at our disposal that have been working so well. The one true test of whether or not we've been successful is how they have to react to us. Notice I didn't say respond. The other side, the New World Order crowd, is now being forced to react. In other words, knee-jerk response. One of the challenges to that, which I originally had questioned from the very beginning with the Oklahoma bombing, knowing what we know now about the personalities, having identified many of the parties involved, with the portfolios that we have been able to build up on many of these individuals, especially the federal personnel that were on site, we now know where they were prior to the bombing, what interactivities are involved with, what foreign government agencies they're involved with. Yes, I said foreign. And that many of these characters, of course, did not feel they would have to worry about the Patriot movement after April 19th of 1995. Well, it is almost a year later, and yes, we are still here. The reason? You. That's why, again, there is safety in numbers. It's the only strength this nation has ever had. And I guess I'd challenge you to that, too, because what other strength was there? The only reason this nation came about is because all of the people finally perceived and understood the common threat to their well-being. And that, no, it made no difference if they were of exact like mind. In fact, I guess I'll remind you, when this document was written, when the Constitution and Bill of Rights were put together, that they virtually had fist fights. That these people put in the same room had to be put in under lock and key so they wouldn't escape. Yes, that's right. Remember that there was great conflict afoot. That there were definitely at least 2, possibly 3 or 5 different schools, depending upon the instructor that you have with regard to history. So there's nothing new in the Patriot movement right now. What we have to understand is our common goal. And that's why I say anybody who has the time to backbite or to turn and fight or waste air or space or written material on subjects that are not relative to attacking the New World Order, to going after the aggressor, are wasting resources that we certainly don't have, nor are we willing to waste. We are concentrating our fires, as we say, on the aggressor because that is the threat. The common bond is crucial to all of us. And again, I would also question and remind you that is it not our enemy that has usually come with silken tongue behind us to try and create barbs amongst us? That's what we are seeing today, and that's where we are not going to be drawn into that particular fight. These tools are crucial. Now, with regard to audio tapes and videotapes, there are such series as, and I highly recommend this one, America with a K. We have all forms of radio production pieces being done by many different people and personalities. All of these should be reproduced en masse. Let me give you a challenge today also. There have been several so far over the last 2 hours. But one of them that I think is most important is you all have relatives who are in uniform. Every one of you listening at one point or another have a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, grandfather, grandmother, a cousin, or just a good family friend, somebody you've even grown up with that right now is in uniform overseas, man or woman, or in law enforcement. We used to call them peace officers. Now we call it law enforcement. Well, these people need to be contacted. And if you're afraid that it is in a sad state of affairs that in your own country you should be afraid of people we used to call peace officers and now call enforcement personnel, these are people who are your own relatives that you are scared to talk to, that should tell you something about how deeply rooted the New World Order is in many areas right now and just how well conditioned you've been by the boob tube. Well, here's a chance, if all else fails, take the tools that are at your disposal and anonymously give them to them. Oh, that's right. They don't need to know where they came from, and they can be left there and left at the disposal of the person you're trying to contact in a whole myriad of ways. And you'll notice I'm not telling you how to do it because I know all of you out there have the collective creative minds to come up with ways all on your own. But the important thing is that you are also obligated as sovereigns, as free men and women, to make that contact and to try and find a peaceable solution to this problem. Now, I will stand by my words as I have in the past that I believe it is inevitable we shall face a physical conflict, and there is a reason. It is not because of our failure that this will happen, but because of our successes. Imagine this. If I told you a year ago that a Specialist 4, like Michael New, would stand up and that we would see him face off against the New World Order and against the government of the United States in such a way, oh, I'll never see that in my lifetime. No, nobody would ever rally behind him either. Guess what? People have, and many that were not in the Patriot movement initially. But what it took was the effort of only one person. One young man who finally had the courage and the intestinal fortitude to stand where it counted. And it doesn't have to be every one of us, but I will say this. It's a sad state of affairs that he should stand in front of us when he should be standing with us, together side by side, shoulder to shoulder. That is the only protection we've ever had in the past, and as long as this republic stands, and as long as we're going to maintain our freedom, it is the only way that it will stay in the future. Now the challenge is to all of us here. I can give you all of the recommendations, all the tools, all the toys, all the resources in the world, but it's kind of like the old horse with the water bucket. You can lead him there, but you can't make him drink. So as I say this, I will also remind you of something else. Don't be discouraged. Think about this. Do you think, or can you imagine, that I have affected positively every person I've come in contact with? Imagine and think back to all of the ridicule that most of the people you know in the Patriot movement have already experienced. There are men here with us today that have been in this movement for 40 and 50 years. And they can see and they will attest. They will actually work as witnesses for you even as I sit here today.